There we go. Holy cow. If you all don't mind just unmuting yourself really quick, letting me know you're here and that I'm not talking to myself because I'm very insecure about technology.
Hello.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. It looks like I'm missing one of my staff. Give me just 1 second. I want to make sure she is able to get in here. Okay, perfect. Well, welcome. We're gonna do Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do an hour of processor training. Today, I don't even know what day it is. It's like 4 or 5 or 6. I don't know. We're just winging it over here. Not really. We're not really winging it, but I don't really know what day it is. What I usually try and do when I start these trainings is just go over a little bit of what we covered in the last live training, so that people have an idea of where we left off. I do these trainings very similar to, if you've been on these with me before, you know that I do them like a descent of an airplane. So we start with a really high level overview and then we start to bring the plane down steps at a time. The training was really started, my staff is on here. I had hired or brought on a loan officer processor team and a new loan officer that neither one of them can retake their test. They've taken it once before because of Prometric centers are closed, I have to bring them on as loan officer assistants until they can go back into the Prometric. So anyway, we have them signed up for Success Track at UWM, and literally the same week that we signed them up, the class is canceled. I have a background in corporate training, and so I thought I can do this. I can train them on how to do this job. One of them has some experience, a couple of them don't. But what I found a long time ago was when I was changing industries, I ended up getting a resume writer. And I was very challenged to see how I could get out of the restaurant industry. It is a little bit like kind of being trapped. I felt like all my experiences in the restaurant industry. And when I sent my information off to this resume writer and he sent it back, I was like, oh dang, I'm smart. Look at all these things I know how to do. I didn't even know. And that was really my first exposure or introduction to transferable skill sets. My training runs on the premise of operating on transferable skill sets. We had a meeting earlier this year in Irvine where we talked about the majority of people that are in the mortgage industry either know somebody or have a family member or fell into it, that nobody really goes out and chooses to be in this industry. And so if that really is the case and people aren't really seeking out the education or the job in and of itself, then we have to rely on the knowledge that people already have. So here's my disclaimer. I do not run this trainings based on compliance. We will talk about compliance. I will teach you compliance, but I am not knowledgeable in the compliance of every state. So the function of these trainings are really best practices in doing this job. The other disclaimer, which now I forgot because it's Thursday and my brain is almost fried. When I remember, I'll come back and tell you. Technology. So, just know that a lot of times I purposefully don't use the industry correct terminology for things because again, the platform is relying on and getting people to use what they already know and transfer that skill set into processing mortgages. So usually when I say something that's not like technically mortgage correct, I say, don't beat me up on that, I know, but I'm trying to bring this down to the most basic common level of knowledge that anybody in the room would have. If you're here because you are referred, that's probably one of the reasons why you were referred here. Okay, so enough about me. Last time we talked about, we just did a real quick overview of process flow. What docs do I really need to in order to submit? Like what would be documents that were missing from a file, or where you get hung up with certain lenders when you're trying to submit, because that's frustrating. What people or professions or parties to a transaction? Who do I need to be having communications with in order to process a file? And then legitimately, we talk about legitimately, how do I do this job? Okay, so today, one of the things that, the only thing really that we're going to talk about for today for an entire hour is verifications of employment. I wouldn't normally have done this, but because of the environment that we're in right now with COVID, it's become exponentially more important. And we're starting to see the requirement for verifications of employment on files that we, a month ago, probably wouldn't have, or actually we've been in COVID now for a month. So 2 months ago, we probably wouldn't have needed. So here we go. There are certain loan types and certain income types that no matter what, you're going to need a verification of employment on. I try to talk to the people that work for me that if you have either of these types of files, you really shouldn't even be giving an approval without a verification of employment. So that's kind of one of the things I want to talk. I need to get the kind of phrase out of my vocabulary because it's not kind of, it is legitimately the things that you want to do. Okay, so first and foremost, if you are processing an FHA loan, you have to have a verification. Now, I'm going to put this up the way that I learned it because that's how I know it. I've noticed over the last year or two, this has begun to change. The acronym has begun to change. So when I was in the industry, it was a written VOE, written verification of employment. What I'm starting to see more of is a VVOE or just VOE. So when I started in the, oh, that light is right on that. Hold on, here, let me, hold on. Or just a VOE. So when I started in the industry, there's a form in Calyx where we would call at the beginning of the process to make sure the client actually worked at that employer. We would confirm the date of employment, processor would sign it and put it in the file. This is a verbal VOE. This is like what would be done the week of closing. And this is a written. So this is how I learned it when I got into the industry. What you will know as a broker or as a processor is that this information and these acronyms may come out different from every bank. So really the point is to see it. I see this one, I really don't even see it as a WVOE anymore, okay? So make sure you read the entire condition so you know what kind of verification you need, okay? But on an FHA loan, 2 years, you got to have the written. Okay, now for income, the guidelines on income have gotten so, I guess the PC word would be finicky. I really want to say such bullshit, but I digress. That we're seeing the need to have verifications even for hourly employees because of the variable pay or variable hours situation. So here's some types of income. If you are processing a file and the borrower has these types of income in their file, you're going to need a verification of employment. So commission, bonus, overtime, now we're going to talk about this one really quick. Other. So some examples of other would be like differential pay. So that's really common for nurses. They may make $25 an hour, or their starting pay is $25 an hour, but they work nights, and so they get a shift differential for the night shift. and then they get another additional hourly incentive added for weekends. And so that would also be in the other screen. Okay. This is going to be more of not necessarily something that you are going to see on your submission. It's going to be when it comes back from approval. And you really should have some really clear direction from the underwriter about what it is that you need on a verification form. If you have an FHA loan or you have a borrower that right away has commission, bonus, or overtime income, then you want to get this ordered. It would be best if you had it in your submission, but wouldn't maybe necessarily hold the file for submission if you didn't have it. But you would want to, at the same time that you put your title and insurance orders out, you would also want to send the order out for the verification of employment. Now, how do you, okay, I get that. I got to order the verification. How do I do that? Okay. So the first thing that we do is we call the employer. Okay, we get this on page 2 of the loan application. We call the employer, and we let them know, hey, I'm working with one of your employees. They're working on obtaining a mortgage loan, and we need to do a verification of employment and income. Okay. Who would be the person in your company that could complete the form that they need for their loan? Okay. Now, when you do this, they're going to give you a name. You can ask, I mean, you don't have to talk to the person. You can ask them for an email or a fax number. That's fine. When you make the request, do not put the person's name on the form. Okay? It is, the verification of employment and income needs to be as organic as possible, meaning it goes to the right person. Now, if they say, oh yeah, that's Deb Martinez in Human Resources, and we say, we send the form out and we send it to Deb Martinez, then we've now bypassed the organic process of just sending it to Human Resources. And so the problematic situation that begins to happen is, how does anybody know that Deb Martinez is actually in Human Resources and isn't our client's coworker that sits right there at the next desk? So they may say, oh yeah, it's Deb Martinez. And you can say, great, is that what's her job title? And whatever the job title is, that's what you want to put on the form for when you send it to the employer. Okay, so if Deb Martinez is Human Resources, then you would put to Human Resources or to payroll. Okay, if you don't know or they don't tell you, then just put to payroll. Because then the thought is you send it to the payroll department. When Deb Martinez signs it at the bottom, we just sent it to payroll. So Deb Martinez must be in payroll because we sent it to the payroll department. Okay. Now, that's the easiest part. Now, sometimes employers use a third party. It's called a third party reporting site. Here are the most common ones. Okay, the work number, Unity, and I-Verify. Okay, there are some other smaller ones, but what happens is, oh, that light is really gonna make me mad today. Okay, but what happens here?
I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
The employer sends their payroll data most likely through some sort of like uploading platform. The employer sends their payroll data to one of these that they choose. of their choosing, so that their human resource department isn't handling all the phone calls for verification of employment. Now you have to understand, mortgage companies aren't the only ones asking for verification of employment and income. All the state and county health and human services departments are. So anybody that owes child support, anybody that's getting any sort of government assistance, food stamps, TANF, Medicaid, medical assistance. We have several different programs in Colorado that are income-based. So we're, as mortgage companies, we're not the only ones asking the employer to verify this information. So if you've got a bigger company, most of the time they're using one of these third-party sites, okay? So what they do is the employer pushes their payroll data to this site. We have to retrieve the data from this site. And then this is us, okay? So there are, I can't really, I don't know that time will permit for me to go through the process of logging into each one of these accounts and how it works. The work number is by far, can be the hardest or the easiest if you know how it works. The first thing that I would do is check with the credit report provider. A lot of them offer the service of ordering work number verifications through the credit reporting portal. Wow, my hair looks like I had a rough night last night. It looks really much more cute in person. That looks real ratchet right there. Sorry, y'all. I did put makeup on though. Anyway, sorry. If a little bit more challenging way, but a way to do it without a charge, is for the borrower themselves to establish an employee account at the work number and retrieve this information. It's not simple and it can frustrate the client very easily, but if you have a more tech savvy borrower, that would be an option to do. Unity, you basically sign up for an account and then you put in the borrower's identifying information, you pay for the report, you get it right away, and same with iVerify, okay? Part of the reason that this has become more important, obviously, is because of COVID and the restrictions, the furloughs, the reduction in hours for people. This is something that I would imagine, well, I mean, we're seeing it on our files, that we're needing this more, especially the verbals. We're needing these more than we did 2 months ago. So having a good contact person is going to be really important. So you're going to, if you're doing a verification and you get it from one of these third-party sites, we also want to make sure that we find out from the borrower who is their direct supervisor or the human resource person at their location, because we will need to do a closing verification of employment. Now this part, every lender is doing different. Some of them do it before you go to close and some of them do it the day that the money is transferring. Some of them are still just following Fannie Mae's rules where you're just gonna have it once. Okay. So having a good contact person is going to be really important from the get-go. So when you make that first call, make sure you find out if they say, oh, he used the work number. That's great. Thank you so much for that information. Can you also tell me who handles payroll or who will be able to do the verbal verification of employment before closing? Because we will need to speak to somebody in the office to verify they still have their job before we close. Make sense? Okay, nobody unmuted, so I'm assuming we're good. Okay. Now, here, as a processor, when you get this information back, now if you get it back from the work number or one of these sites and you see a column, so you might have like year to date, and then you might have like bonus, and then overtime, right? And then this is like 2020, 2019, whoops, 2019, 2018, right? And like, let's say this says 5,000 and this says 17,000. Just go with it. We know people make more than this, okay? and this says 16,000, okay? And maybe they got a little bit of a bonus in here and they work a little bit of overtime, okay? But if you ever have a field that says other and you're using, and this income is being used to qualify, you're gonna have to get an explanation from the employer. Or an explanation from the borrower on what it is. Now, most of the time, an explanation from the borrower will not be sufficient. But as a processor, when you get this information, if you see other, you've got more work to do. Okay. Now, on these forms, you need both at least 2 years of info. If you're sending the Fannie Mae form to the employer, sometimes what happens is they only fill out the year-to-date info. But on the form, you see that their start date was 2018. So as a processor, it's your responsibility and your job function to make sure that this form is complete for underwriting. So some common things that we see missed, especially on the Fannie Mae form, is the through date. So I'm going to screen share here real quick. I'm going to pull this up while we are on this call. Give me just 1 second here. So we have a sample borrower, Jaime Jones. He's a cook at the taco house because I love tacos a lot. Ooh, hold on. Make sure my computer's stable. Okay, so we're going to share the screen and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is the actual Fannie Mae form that's printed out of Calyx. You can just grab a PDF of this online on Google if you needed to, if you didn't have access to Calyx. Okay, imported the borrower's information. We always have C attachment in the signature of the application because we always just send the borrower's authorization that's signed in their disclosure package. The employer is going to need to fill out the date of hire, the current position. Now, number 11, a lot of times employers won't fill this out. So for example, in Colorado is a employment at will state. And so legally an employer's position may be we don't comment on the continuity of employment because it can be perceived as contractual. It can be perceived that the employment has become contractual instead of at will, which is fine. But you still probably need to be looking and asking them to complete this with an NA, not applicable, or we don't comment on it. So here's one of the areas that we often see that it's missed. What you'll see sometimes is they'll put a dollar amount here, but not mark the box. Or they'll mark the box, but then not put a dollar amount here. So what is their pay amount and how are they paid it? So do they make $2,000 monthly? Do they make $2,000 weekly? Do they make $2,000 every year? Do they make $2,000 every hour? Okay. The other area that we often see missed is right here. Okay, so this is the year-to-date earnings. But if we have them, like let's say this was filled out today on Thursday. Well, chances are it's not good through the hours that Jaime worked yesterday. The chances are the information is valid from the last payroll cycle. So we need to know when it was good through. So this is one of the ones that we often see not completed. And then you can see overtime, commission, bonus, total. And what you'll see if somebody has other pay is they'll mark off, they'll cross out one of these that the borrower doesn't receive, and they will mark other. So what you are wanting is if there's any sort of other or unclear what the income type is, you want them to just make a comment of it down here in the remarks section. Now, let's say Jaime just started at the taco house last year and we need 2 years. We're going to send this exact same form to the previous employer, but we're only going to ask them to complete section 3. And this box right here is the one that we often get either not filled out or not completely filled out. So they have the option of this was their base pay, overtime, commission per year, or they can fill it out for the year to date that they were not. I've seen that done and not had any kickbacks on it. But it's asking for their pay at the time their employment was complete. It says termination, but that assumes people were fired. Okay, and then we need them to fill out the bottom section here, part 4, completely. You may or may not get this form kicked back if these items over here are not marked, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. That was dumb, 14 through 19. The reason you would want it completed is if a lot of times if our borrower recently received a raise, then the year-to-date income is going to look low based on what they're currently being paid. And if we don't know that, an underwriter is going to start making their own assumptions about why the pay would be low. And the first thing, and I don't know why, but the first thing is this conclusion that the borrower must not work 40 hours a week. So it's easy to explain if their year-to-date income is low for the type of pay they get because we see that their last pay increase was 2 months ago. So for example, if Jaime made $10 an hour times 40 hours a week, it's 400 for the first 2 months, right? Be 3,200. And if he did that for 4 months, it'd be at 6,400. But Jaime got a raise to $12 an hour. Let's see. Okay. So he actually makes more for the 40 hours, right? But if we get his paycheck stub, sorry. Okay. So times 2 would be 86. Okay. So 7680 would be for 4 months. Okay. But what if his income is 32 plus 38, so 70/40? Okay, because he worked these 2 months at $10 an hour and these 2 months at $12 an hour, and his year to date is 7,040, but his pay stub says he makes $12 an hour, and the underwriter is expecting his year to date to say 7,680, but our VOE or his year to date on his pay stub says 7,040. Okay, automatically, more times than not, and I will blanket statement this, more times than not, the underwriter is making the assumption, oh, well, he must not work 40 hours a week. The more probable thing is that the borrower got a raise or a promotion and has a different pay hourly pay or base pay structure. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so this is a little bit more advanced, but you're gonna come across it. And so I'd rather just tell you and have you file it away as something that you learned, that you've heard before. Now, I hate this rule. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. Okay. A lot of times what they want to do is they want to average the income, which is such BS. So if you have a borrower that recently got a raise, so they were making $10 an hour, now they're making 12, their year to date is low, right? So it was the 70-40, but they were expecting it to be the 76-80, okay? What they want to do is take this, the 70-40, and divide it by the 4 months, right? Because Jaime worked he worked 8 weeks at this pay, at the one, and then 8 weeks at the other pay. So they want to divide this by 4 months. All of a sudden I feel like I don't know how to do math. Okay, so now they want to give him only $17.60 a month because they want to take this year to date and average it. What they should be doing is giving Jaime this, which is $12 an hour times 40 hours a week. They should be giving him this divided by 4, which is 1920. Okay, so there's a difference in monthly income of, what is that, $260 a month difference. So how do you fight this? It's a pain in the ass, but you can. What you want to do is 2 things. You can ask the borrower for their year-end pay stub or an hours ledger from the employer. And what you're trying to prove is that the borrower is working 40 hours a week and you're fighting for them to give you the 40 hours at the new pay rate. Because what they're doing here is effectively 10 plus 12 is 22 divided by 2. They're effectively only giving him $11 an hour here because they're averaging it. So the borrower is not getting full credit for their current pay type when they do this averaging BS. Fight me about it. I fight every underwriter about this, and it's going to be extra work. But if you get an approval back and the income is low and they're averaging and all this stuff, you got to be prepared on how to handle it. And this is how. They're averaging the year-to-date income instead of averaging the hours that are worked multiplied by the new rate of pay. So like I said, this is a little bit more advanced, but if you have somebody who's earning an hourly wage and the approval comes back and the loan officer is hot and they're like, what the F with my income and what is going on, right? So the variable pay or variable hours, basically meaning if somebody doesn't earn salary, then how we view the income is different. And when I say we, I mean the guidelines, not we as originators. How the income is calculated and then what is considered the effective income. Effective income is the income we're going to use on the loan. Okay, so this is a little bit more higher level, but you've heard it. And when it comes across your plate, you're going to be like, oh, I heard this. She told me about this, right? And then at least you'll have a point of reference and you'll understand what the issue is. Okay. Something else that will happen is if a borrower receives a raise right before or during the loan process, the lender is going to want a pay stub at least one pay stub with the new rate of pay on it, okay? You may also have a borrower who is going to qualify for a home based on an offer letter of employment, meaning let's say maybe they're relocating or they got a new job at a new company and they start, depending on your investor, meaning your bank, most of them will want a pay stub before you close. I have a few banking relationships where they will allow us to give it to them after closing before they ship it off to the investor. Okay, so those are a couple of one-off situations that may occur right before. So you may have a file that doesn't have pay stubs because all they currently have is an offer letter, and we're going to approve them on the offer letter, and we're going to have to provide a pay stub before they go to closing. Check your guidelines, because I believe in some instances you need a full 30-day of pay stubs, and this is going to be dictated by loan type. Sound good? Okay. Now, the best thing that you can do as a processor when you're doing this is prepare not only the borrower, but also the employer, that it's not a one and done. And so when you call or when you get the verification back or when you email the form to somebody, please let them know that somebody will be calling them before the employee can close to verify that they're still employed, so that they know and they're expecting that. Okay, we have one right now that is driving my processor nuts. The company is working from home now, which is a situation that they're not fully used to. We've been, for a good solid week now, she's been trying to get the verification of employment. Called the point of contact, and the point of contact's toddler child answered the phone. And it was a work line. And the processor tried to be really resourceful, tried to get a hold of someone else in the corporate office and said, hey, I'm really, I apologize for having to continue to call. I wanted to know if there was any other workaround or if there was somebody else available that could complete this form. Y'all, sometimes it gets to the point where you have to be the squeaky wheel. And I will tell you that the best thing that you can do is keep it light and fluffy and be humorous if that's in your nature. I have called on occasion as a processor and said, hey, I do this with title companies as well. I say, hey, I really hate to call and be that person that's a total pain in the butt, like I need this yesterday, but I have to be that person and call and be a pain in the butt, and I need it yesterday. So I'm at your kind of your mercy. What else can I do to get this form done or get this completed? Everybody's in a new environment right now, and so it can be really challenging. I lost my nuggets yesterday on my daughter, my second grader's teacher. She was calling to check in on how my child was doing because she hadn't turned in any assignments in the classroom. And I was like, oh girl, she's fine. She's fine. She's doing the ELA. She's on the YouTube. She's doing the math. She's doing the social studies. However, her dad and I are not doing okay. And it'll be a day or two before she logs into the Seesaw account and actually uploads the assignments that she did, because we have 4 kids who all have teachers who want to use 5 different websites and a high schooler who's doing this in 7 classes. Sweetheart, today we're just trying to make sure everybody shows up in the class that you want them to be in on time. Okay, we'll get the stuff turned in next week, right? So now I can only imagine. I had a little bit more sympathy for this human resource person yesterday when her toddler answered the phone, and I was like, oh, homegirl's probably over there with her other kid on the homeschool and the baby's answering the work phone. She is not in the mind space filling out our verification of employment. But we'd been waiting for it for a week. So the best thing to do is sympathize with people right now. Tell them that you totally understand. You can be like, hey, I am also working from home. My baby is currently sticking his finger up my nose, so you'll have to pardon me if I pause. But I'm calling because we're at the point where we can't move forward on your employee's loan until we have this document. Is there something I can do to help? Is there any questions that you have for me? Hey, I can send it to you in DocuSign so you can type everything in if that's a service that you have available to you as a processor. How can we make this process easier and less inconvenient for the employer? All right, that's my soapbox about that. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Thing about,
Can you hear me?
Who is that? Because I didn't hear you.
Lisa.
Lisa?
Yeah, hi.
Can't hear you.
Okay, I was just going to say
Oh,
thanks.
hold on a second. My computer's on mute. Okay. What's up, girl?
That's okay. I was just wanting to say thanks for those examples and how to word things and articulate things. I find myself having a kind of a challenge with that sometimes when I get on the phone, because I'm a loan officer assistant, so I'm learning the process kind of from the bottom up, doing a complete career change, blah blah blah. So those examples, throw them out all you want. I love it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so there is one other thing that I want to address really quick, and then I'll open up the call. When you have bigger employers, restaurants, city government, things like that, sometimes, or school districts, sometimes I've taken it upon myself to just Google like employment verification for Denver Public Schools, okay? I want to warn you about one website right off the bat, because it is not what you think it is, and we got caught in this website and this service. So I just want to make sure that you all are aware, if you're ever Googling or trying to find an employer's phone number, let's say they're like, oh, you can get that from our corporate office, but they don't give you the corporate phone number. Don't use TrueWork, okay? TrueWork, if you Google a verification or you're trying to find something up, this will pop up as an employment verification. It's not the verification. They're trying to present themselves like the work number, okay? So if you remember the work number, the employer takes their data and they push their employment data to the third-party verification site. It's very similar to how a credit card pushes the account information to the credit companies, to Experian, to TransUnion, right? However that works, like, I don't really know, like, do they upload something? Do they type it in? I don't know. But TrueWork will come up in a Google search at the very top of the page, and it's a charge, and you don't really think much of it because all of the other third-party sites are also a charge to obtain the information, okay? But TrueWork is just, I don't even know how many people it is, but they're just people who go out into the world and do the same thing that you're supposed to do. They just call the employer, you have a platform, you're going to enter the borrower information in, so you're going to like put all this information in and get the actual verification of employment, but you're not. And so what's going to happen is these people from TrueWork are going to go out in the world and call the employer and do all the things that I just told you. And we finally caught on to this. And we had, I mean, it was like a nightmare. My son was working for me at the time, and I was teaching him the business, and it was for a United Airlines employee. I mean, we both were at each other's throats, because I was like, Tyler, what's so hard about this? And he's like, this is what they're telling me. And I'm like, that's complete BS. What's going on? And it wasn't until I stopped what I was doing and got into the system. And then like 2 days later, we got the verification back, and it was from the work number. And I was like, what the? And I was like, show me what you did. How did you, right? So it was United Airlines, right? Like you can't just call human resources at United Airlines. You have to get a little bit more resourceful than that, okay, to get a verification of employment. And so he walked me through what he was doing, and we saw all of this. I realized what this website was, and it's tricky and misleading. So just stay away from True Work, okay? Just don't. Don't do it, girl. Don't do it. Oh, girl, I'm not gonna do it. Just don't. Oh, if you don't watch TikTok, then you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. So the last thing is, if you are not able, let's say you are not able for whatever reason, time frame, human resource person is working at home and her toddler's answering the phone, so you're not actually talking to an adult. Let's say you can't get a verification of employment. Let's say you can't get the breakdown of their income. There's still something else that you can do. If you get okay, you can get your year-end pay stub. This is also true if something comes up on their verification of employment and says other, we don't really know what it is. If you can get their year-end pay stub and you can match, like let's say it's shift differential. I also have a gentleman that works at a hospital, but he speaks Spanish, so he gets a language incentive, which is also considered a pay differential. Okay, so if you can get a year-end pay stub and you can match the other column or to your VOE, or let's say you weren't able to get a VOE, if you can get the year-end pay stub for, you know, like right now it'd be 19 and 18, okay? The very last pay stub of the year is going to show you their entire year-to-date pay on their pay stub of all the different pay types. And we've had to do this. I hate to say that we've had to do it more frequently, but we've had to do it more frequently. Okay, so just know that, you know, our job is to be resourceful and try and ease some of the burden from the borrower. That's how I view processing, and ease the burden from the loan officer from having to do this stuff, right? Because the more, going back to our restaurant example, right? If your server is back in the kitchen cooking the food and traying it up, then the server's not out paying attention to the table or taking another table, which keeps the restaurant even more busy. You can do more, you can make more money, you can serve more people if you have what is called, in the restaurant industry, it's called back of the house staff. And those are the people that work behind the scenes. It literally is where all the magic happens. So you got, it's called the heart of the house. So as a processor, your job is really to make it happen, but also be resourceful and simplify and present the information that you need in a clear and concise manner. So,
real quick, I just had a quick question. You said two things we can compare the year-end pay stubs to. We can match it to the other column, and what was the other one?
Oh no, I meant, sorry, not compare it to the other column, but if you weren't able to get a verification of employment, a year-end pay stub would have the same data that you're essentially trying to get with a verification of employment.
Oh, okay. Sorry, thanks.
Yep, no problem. I just every now and again. So I also wanted to, somebody posted this today and I thought it was amazing, so I wanted to read it to you guys. So I know that in the past I've been guilty of this. I've talked about when I was a processor, I would take the processing or the email with the approval on it. I would draft an email to the loan officer, and I would bullet point for the loan officer what I needed them to get from the borrower for my file. Okay, and when I was a processor, I always viewed it as my file, okay, because it's my job to get it to the end point. If it's your file and you piss me off, I might not want to work on your file. So you really have to take ownership over the file. It's your file, it's your job. Okay, and so one of the things I have been guilty of, in fact, I just did it this last week and now I'm like, I'm such an a-hole, but is do not cut and paste the condition from the approval and send it to the borrower, because we are speaking a very industry specific language. And if you don't tell a borrower exactly what you want, let me just read this to you really quick. Okay, so it says, we do not ever copy and paste conditions to the borrower under any circumstances. If you don't know what the condition means, neither does the borrower. They don't work here. If you had a painter coming to your house to match the paint color and the painter told you to go get the matching color, your reaction would likely first be, how the fuck am I supposed to know what color it is? And then you'd go to the paint store with your very limited knowledge of how to do someone else's supposed area of expertise, and more likely than not, come back with the wrong paint. We need the paint right. We need the right paint. Take the path of least resistance. If you acknowledge what is needed from the start and handle it in detail, you will get what you need quickly without the back and forth. I do not want to see shitty swatches of gray all over the walls, none of which are planetary silver. Okay, so meaning, when you send the verification of employment to an employer, because they don't use a third party, you're going to say, and I'm going to pull it, okay, you're going to say, hey, Debbie, whether this is an email over the phone, okay, hey, Debbie, I'm going to fax over this verification of employment for Jaime. He's getting a loan, and we need to verify his, not only his employment date, but also his income and any breakdown of different types of income. Please, sorry, I lost my, I'm going to pull up the form. I'm just going to ask if you could complete section 2, because that's for current employment, and then section 4, which is your information. That would be great. If you are emailing it, you can type up that same thing, okay? And then you would say, and Debbie, I just want to make sure that I let you know that you'll be getting a call from someone at the bank before we close, just verifying that Jaime is still employed before we close. Thank you so much. Is this the best number where they can reach you when that time comes? The biggest pushback you'll get is sending the form out for a previous employer. So the borrower's previous employer, and they're going to call you, or they're just going to ignore you, and they'll be like, it says right here that this is for current employment, and they don't work there. Oh yeah, you know, that is the biggest part of the form. Section 3 is really small. It's down at the bottom. That's for previous employment. If you could complete, but if you just say it up front, hey Debbie, I'm sending over that form that we talked about on the phone. Section 3 is for previous employment. If you could complete that for Jaime, we'd really appreciate it. Sometimes you get employers who say, I'm not fucking doing that. He doesn't work here anymore and I don't have to. That's fine. Jaime's probably gonna have to go through his box of pay stubs and see what he can find. But our job is to be resourceful. Okay. We have just a few minutes left for our hour. Does anybody have any other questions, practices, procedures for this?
Yeah, I do real quick, just to clarify what you just said. So if the employer for the previous employment doesn't want to do that, then just drop it and don't, and just go from there.
You probably can't. So you can try and get a verbal. You can maybe ask them, like if they're not going to complete the form, you can ask them the questions verbally, like, I totally understand. You have just a minute where I could ask you these questions verbally, and maybe I could complete the form and send it to you for signature, or you can write a processor cert saying that you spoke with Debbie Martinez at the Taco House. She verbally declined to complete the form, but was able to answer the following questions for you, sign and date it, turn it in. It's better to turn that into submit it to the underwriter. And it's better to have something with a processor cert than nothing. The underwriter may come back and say, we're not accepting it. They may come back and be like, oh, damn, that girl went way above and beyond. But your job is to do that for the clients. The other thing I wanted to jump in on a screen share really quick and show you. Okay, so in Calyx, if you go right here to verifs, so verifications, you do verification of mortgage or rent, it creates the form, but we're going to go to verification of employment. Sometimes this information is blank. We're just going to click the button from the application, and it's going to import the information that is in page 2. Everything that's in here in page 2 for employment, when I go to the verif screen and I click from the loan app, the reason this is helpful is if they have more than one employer or if there's a co-borrower, then I don't have to type all this information in. You can see that on this one, we literally typed in human resources or payroll. And you want to put the phone number where you found, like, where did you get the phone number? If the client gave you a phone number, like that's their direct line, you may just want to Google the employer real quick and put whatever you find on Google. But you want to put the phone number ultimately that you call, okay? Now, if you ever get a condition back that says you just need to verify the dates of employment, you're still going to use this form, but instead of a standard VOE, you're going to do a telephone verification of employment. You're going to tell them, how did you get this phone number? Well, we always just put other and we put google.com. Okay. We write Debbie's name here. And today's date. Oh, this does it for me. Okay. Now, is the applicant currently employed? Yes or no? Probability of employment, you can just put unknown if they're like, we don't comment. Depending on if this is previous employment, some lenders will still have us do a verbal, even if we don't need a full verification of employment, they'll have us call and do a verbal on their start date. So you can do that. Not very many lenders do. I'm trying to think I think it's underwriter specific. Like, I want to say, like, I got a weird one-off file at Remen where they wanted us to do this. And I was like, that's really silly, but pick our battles, just call and do it. You may not always get, so sometimes they won't confirm the dollar amount. If you haven't sent them an authorization, that's fine. Their current position, if they were a previous employer, you would just put previous. If you don't know, or they might say, like, can you tell me what his job function there, if he was a technician or whatever. They may not always comment on overtime or bonus because, as you know, it's probably dependent on workload. And more times than not, a borrower does not have any ownership interest in the company. Now, I would say if you're doing any of these right now during COVID, I would ask the question, being a forethoughtful processor, but you may need to check with your company. I would want my processors to ask, is the borrower currently on any sort of work restrictions or hour restrictions during COVID? And you can ask that and then print this form and then you'll sign it. But it's a whole category in and of itself up here in the verifications in the Calyx software. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, that's all that I have for you today. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I jump on for an hour at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. I have an outline put together of what we're going to talk about. Next week, today, I can't even believe today's Thursday already, you guys. Next week, we're going to talk about the process of early closing disclosures and closing disclosures. So we only have an hour. If you are more of an advanced processor and this seems you're wanting more advanced knowledge, I would suggest that